My name is Kelly Dittmar. I'm a scholar at the Center for American Women and Politics at Rutgers University in New Jersey in the United States. And I'm also an assistant professor of political science at Rutgers-Camden. I thought I'd talk today a little bit about the progress that women have made in American politics, especially in American elections and representation, as well as the progress that they have left to make. So 2 years ago, many people were talking about 2018 as a quote-unquote year of the woman. And it was. Women made lots of notable gains. But there's still a lot of work left to do to reach gender parity in our elections and in those who serve in elected office in the US. In 2020, we're talking about another historic year. For example, we had 6 women run for the Democratic nomination for president, more than had ever run at one time for a major party nomination for the presidency. We're also celebrating 100 years since the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which prevented the denial of the vote on account of sex. In other words, enfranchising women nationwide. So where are we today? And what did 2018 and the early parts of the 2020 election tell us about the progress that women have made and the work we have left to do? In 2018, women made history. And they've already made history again in 2020. But they haven't, and will not this year, achieve parity with men in American politics. In 2018, we saw a record number of women running for office, especially at the congressional and gubernatorial level. That number may also increase this year in the number of women running for Congress. And again, 6 women ran for the presidency. But in 2018, women were still less than a quarter of candidates for congressional offices. And this year, again, they're underrepresented in the candidate pool. And so a lot more work to do to get closer to that 50%, which is women's representation in the population. Women also won elections at high rates in 2018, higher than their male counterparts, and they won in some of the most competitive races. In fact, they were responsible for flipping our US House of Representatives from being controlled by the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. Women were really contributing to the success, especially of Democrats in 2018. But again, we see some limitations. When we look at the representation of women that resulted from the 2018 election and the number of women who serve today, they are still just 23.6% of members of Congress, 9 of 50 governors nationwide, 29.3% of statewide elected executive officials, about 29% of state legislators, and only 22% of mayors of some of our largest cities over 30,000 people. And so, of course, we have a lot more work to do to get to gender parity, not only in who's running, but also in who's serving in elected office in American politics. It's also important to note that the success of women is not universal, and it certainly wasn't in 2018 when we saw Democrats increasing their representation, or Democratic women increasing their representation significantly across levels of office, while Republican women saw a decline in their representation, again, across levels of office. Perhaps most notably in the US House of Representatives, where the number of Republican women was already small at 23, and declined to just 13 members out of 435 members overall. Another way to look at the success of women and note the differences among women is to look at differences by racial and ethnic diversity. We saw some really important and historic gains for women of color in the 2018 elections. There were a number of states in which the first women of color were elected to the US Congress. And we elected the first Democratic woman of color as governor in our state of New Mexico. So these are really important historical moments and milestones to celebrate for women and women's representation. But again, we were noting that these were a lot of firsts. And so we have a lot more room to increase the representation and diversity of women in electoral office throughout the United States. One statistic to note is that 26 states in the US have yet to send a woman of color to Congress. So again, unfinished business that we have left to do. Finally, the story of women's political success is more complex than just the records broken or history made. Women continue to face different hurdles than men in their routes to elective office, whether it be from the candidate emergence stage, where women of color are more likely to be discouraged than white women or men in making the decision to run for office, or the biases and perceptions that women face that they are less qualified or capable of winning. All of these are hurdles that they might face in trying to be successful in American politics. And they're hurdles that, while many women have cleared, still make it harder for them to not only make the decision to run, but also to win and then become part of our population of elected officials. In 2020, we saw this again already. Women who ran for president having to prove time and again that they are electable, convince voters that a black woman or a white woman could be elected president. And so they have to wage multiple campaigns at once, not just proving they're the best candidate for the job, but also telling voters that their gender, their race, or the combination of both isn't a hurdle to elected office, but instead is an asset that they bring to candidacy and office holding. Women continue to clear these hurdles and break through barriers in American politics. But they are doing a lot more work along the way, and we're grateful for that work because they're expanding our expectations and our images of what is possible in American politics. But that doesn't mean there's not a lot more work that is left to do to reach that gender parity that I was talking about at the start. So women will continue to do that work. Men have to contribute as well so that we can celebrate greater progress for women's representation, greater accessibility to office for women, and also so that in this year where we're celebrating women's right to vote, that we see that political empowerment go beyond the ballot box to be those who are on the ballot.